Welcome back, everyone. And this is Two Guys and a Kaiju's podcast. I'm your host, King Goji.
And I'm your host, Godzuki. Your co-host. I'm co-hosting here. King Goji is the main host.
He thinks he's the co-host, but okay. Moving on.
Yeah, there's not a power struggle going on.
Oh, no, not at all. No.
Yeah, definitely, power struggle, that whole sort of theme doesn't have anything to do with Kaiju.
No. No Lord of the Rings here.
That's right. Well, it's great to have you, or it's great to be here today.
Yes.
King Goji. It's
always
our
a pleasure.
First official episode.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's
episode 1.
Episode 1. We are episode 1 today.
This is it, getting it started off. We're both new podcasters, kind of trying this out for the first time, but really excited to share with you guys something that King Goji is very passionate about, and I'm just learning, and that's Kaiju.
That is.
So give us a little rundown on Kaiju. We kind of mentioned it in the intro, but maybe catch us up to speed, and we can introduce the first topic today.
All right. Well, let's start with that. Well, let's just say I'll remind everyone what is a kaiju. A kaiju is the Japanese word for giant monster, but it doesn't apply to Japan mostly. It can be any country. It could be any monster. It just simply states giant monster.
And it is a film genre. Primarily.
It is a genre of film, yes. But
Yeah.
originally it originated in Japan, and now it has gone global to other nations around the world.
And what would you say is the most famous kaiju out there?
Bambi. No, I'm just kidding. No, the most famous kaiju of all time has to be Godzilla.
Godzilla. If you're like me, you've definitely heard of Godzilla. Mm-hmm. I grew up kind of playing with the Godzilla action figures and having this giant monster smashing all my other action figures. But I've never actually dived into the film specifically. However, King Goji, you have.
I have indeed, Godzuki. I have indeed.
Yeah, and so this is a big thing for you, being able to share Godzilla, what has become really special to you, with our audience.
Yes. Godzilla is a very big part of my life. Always has been. Many times I have tried to express that. Sometimes got me in trouble in school, which is not
really?
a good. You can't smuggle Godzilla movies in schools because they'll throw you out. Yeah,
they got onto you.
Yeah, they got onto me. But then I learned, and I calmed my passion for a couple of years. But Godzilla's never really left my life. So
well, we can definitely shove it in their faces today, because
Correct.
Now here we are podcasting about Godzilla.
Yes,
and making
eat that, teachers.
Here we are.
Finally, I got my revenge.
Yeah. So why don't you introduce what our very first podcast episode is going to be about? We're kind of starting in the realm of Godzilla, the most famous kaiju.
Yes. Japan's greatest, the Japanese nation's greatest art piece.
Godzilla.
Yeah, Godzilla is the greatest export that Japan ever made, other than sushi. Anyway, well, we're going to discuss the first Godzilla. There'll be a 3-part series. This is our first part. And what we'll be focusing on this part of our wonderful new podcast will be Godzilla's origins. What led to the development of Godzilla? What developed, how the geopolitical situation in Japan during the late 40s, early 50s, up until the actual movie premiere. I just think people need to know about the history of Godzilla. He's not just a guy in a rubber suit.
That's right. And so this is the first Godzilla film, is what we're going to be honing in on for our first couple episodes. And that film was in 1954, I believe.
Correct.
I've done a little bit of homework.
A little bit.
Not as much as you.
No, a lifetime of homework for me. No, the first Godzilla film you're right, it was first made in 1954. And it was directed by the brilliant, and bless his soul, Ishiro Honda, and Ishiro Honda was the creative mind behind Godzilla. Well, one of them.
Did he do all directing and special effects, or so he did everything?
No, Ishiro Honda did not do special effects. He oversaw special effects, but no, that job went to the other great man in the Japanese cinema world. That was E.J. Tsuburaya. And E.J. Tsuburaya, of course, is known for doing Ultraman on television in Japan, amongst other things. So there were 4 men that developed the Godzilla we know today. We call them the 4 Crows. There was Ishiro Honda, Teruyuki Tanaka, the producer, and the composer and wonderful, as he was known, the monster composer, Akira Ifukube, with his beautiful scores. And finally, Eiji Tsuburaya, so director, special effects.
I'm just over here impressed that you can remember the names and pronunciations. Let's give it up.
Well,
for King Goji over here.
Well, thank
well
you.
done, my
Appreciate
man.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's also useless knowledge, but apparently it will be helpful to someone.
Yeah, no, and so something that's really cool, as I have been learning a little bit about Kaiju, is 1954. Like, we have a lot of high expectations for movies today as far as CGI and all the special effects that we're used to.
Yep.
But as you go back into 1954, we realize that this film is black and white.
Yes.
And the special effects today are kind of just like using these dolls.
Yes.
And these models of cities, these models of boats, and getting these super zoomed in shots as special effects. And it's really an incredible art form.
It is.
And it's something that it's different than what we're used to. But if you can kind of like throw yourself back in that time, it's like, wow, these guys really were way ahead of their time.
Yes. And I would give credit to the model makers and the artisans who just put their heart and soul to these films. And I would also give credit to the amount of detail, especially just all the models that were built throughout the Godzilla series, especially the early years. Those men and women worked very hard to make these films real as they could at that time. So I want to give a shout out to those. There are probably not a lot of them left, but I want to give a shout out to those creative minds and the family members who have kind of, those folks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to the actors in this film.
Yes.
They really went all in.
Yes, they
did. I was kind
of
of expecting it because it kind of like, if you've ever seen Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer stop motion, that classic movie in Christmas time, whenever the abominable snowman, what do they call him? The Bumble?
The Bumble.
The Bumble.
The Bumble.
Whenever
Yes.
he comes out, and it's like that really scary music, but he's kind of like moving in that stop motion way. That's kind of how Godzilla looks on screen. So we're using like stop motion animation and special effects with these actors though, who are like really giving it everything they got. Like, they're all in.
Yeah.
So like everybody took this project really seriously. Can you tell me and can you explain to our listeners a little bit of why they took it so seriously and what Godzilla means? Like in the Japanese realm of those iconic films?
Well, first of all, I think Godzilla to the Japanese people is a metaphor for the atom bomb, and they take the concept of Godzilla very seriously. The concept behind Godzilla, put it simply, is the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And Godzilla is a victim of the atomic age. It is a metaphor for the victims who were killed and burnt and got sick from the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So he's literally the consequence, a metaphor consequence of those who suffered and died and who live on with the horrible things that happen.
So right from the beginning, he is a character that's pointing to more than just a scary monster movie. Correct.
And the movies, not just Godzilla, the movies in Japan were built to give the public an escape.
Yeah. Yeah, like any films are. They're coming from a time of war propaganda to now creativity and building these films that are truly iconic.
And a lot of the Japanese producers who would go on to, some of the producers who would go on to, and some of the filmmakers would go on to do prison time from the Allied command that were in Japan. So they were Class B war criminals. So there's a lot of, I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but basically it was a hard time for filmmakers in Japan to get their work done.
Yeah, yeah. And give me a little bit about like why we're wanting to bring this to audiences today, why we're wanting to remind people maybe who have never dived into the Godzilla genre, like why we want them to be aware of it today.
Well, It's been almost 70 years. Will be 70 years in about 2.5 years. It will be the 7th anniversary of Godzilla. I think it's important to remind people that, yes, he's a guy in a rubber suit, but also he's still a metaphor for many things. And I think it's important to remind this newer generation that there are consequences to one's actions. And so also he's just a fun movie.
Yeah, and it's just a great time.
It's just a great movie, and it's a great movie series. Yes, there's some ups and downs, but generally it's entertaining. It's kind of like a Hammer movie. Yeah, it's a little gory, but it's still entertaining. And no other studio that I know of, other than a certain animation studio, Disney, has such a record with a film franchise, or a genre of films in his franchise. Godzilla has a total of 38 films. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's 38. And it's the longest running monster franchise in history.
Which is super impressive.
Very impressive. From 1954 to 2022, it's been going on.
You want to hear a fun fact?
What is it?
When I watched King Kong versus Godzilla, I was in Guatemala. And I watched it all in Spanish. I was like, it's going to be monsters. Like, it's not going to be much talking. And I was frustrated.
That's a lot of talking.
I was frustrated the entire time.
Well, you made a bad error in judgment.
couldn't understand
a terrible
a thing.
movie.
Couldn't understand a thing.
Terrible movie.
We won't get into it.
Watch the original. It's even better.
So speaking of the original, before we close out this first episode,
of course,
I thought it'd be really cool for you to share a little bit about your your childhood connection to Godzilla and like what he means to you from like a nostalgic standpoint.
Oh yeah.
And maybe that will kind of like cause our audience, our listeners, to think of those things that were a big deal to us as a kid and how they can even still be a part of our lives today.
Oh, okay. So I grew up with pretty open-minded family. And I was about 4 or 5, maybe 6. We were in a hotel somewhere in Florida. I believe it was at Disney. And
Disney.
Disney.
This is not sponsored by Disney.
Not sponsored by Disney at all, and we don't want them to sponsor us. And there was, back in those days, it was late 90s, so they had VCR machines in the hotels. So my little butt went to go to the local, was it a Rite Aid or who knows? It was some pharmacy.
Yeah.
It was a Kmart. That's what it was. It was
oh
Kmart.
My gosh, Kmart.
It was a Kmart in downtown Orlando.
Man, whatever happened to Kmart?
They just died. And I got one of my first VHS Godzilla tapes. And as a child, it was not the first Godzilla, which we should be talking about, but it was Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. And so that was my very first Godzilla film.
Which in the line, if the first one was in 1954, when was this one?
So this was 1967.
Okay.
Sorry, 66.
Okay,
66.
So 12 years after the original came out.
Correct. And so I was just awestruck by, one, I didn't understand why their mouths were not matching, but that was one of the things I noticed, that the words weren't matching their lips.
Sure.
But that was something I noticed as a child. I was only 6. And the other thing I noticed was, I said, I want that job. I want to be a suit actor. And so,
that's cool.
Yeah. So, but I made the mistake of buying a Godzilla toy that was battery powered, and I thought, I'll just play with a lobster in the pool with it, and it died. Anyway, so that was my first exposure, and then from then on, I went to Suncoast Video Store, and every time I was there was one in our hometown, and I would ask where the Godzilla videos were, VHS, and I would buy VHS every week with my allowance.
That's so cool.
Yes.
Incredible, man. And
Yeah.
I think it's really cool that you want to share this passion with listeners, and you've shared it with me. Like, since I've gotten to know you and be your friend, like I've kind of been introduced to this whole realm, and it's been really exciting to learn, not just like seeing like this iconic monster and his development and evolution. Like it's all so interesting. Like there's
Yeah.
so much that I didn't know that you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But also learning that it does point to like it's got a lot of metaphor and messaging to it that I think is really important. So I guess we'll cut it off there for this first episode.
Yep. Sign off.
Yeah, we'll thank you guys for listening.
Appreciate it. Please like us or whatever this thing is.
We got to get better at our outro.
Yeah, we really got to get better about that.
We'll work on it for
We'll try
the next one.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for tuning in, guys.
Yep.
Like feel free to rate us. I don't even know, 5 stars? Give us a good rating.
Yeah, 3
wherever you're
stars is
listening
good
to.
too. I don't care.
And we'll catch you in the next episode.
Kaiju Ega.
Bye.